Welcome to Kaiser University Multidisciplinary Center as we present today's webinar, Spring into Transition, presented by Rita, Ellis, Damien, Hunte, Cheyney, Cushing, and Kerilyn, Redish. Right now, we're going to review the objectives presented by Cheyney.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So by the end of the presentation, we want you to be able to identify the importance of conducting transition assessments to guide transition planning for students with disabilities. We want you to be able to identify the significance of the KUILSA as an assessment tool of independent living skills for students with significant needs, and identify the benefits mentoring can offer in the transition process. And I'm going to turn it over to Kerilyn, who's going to start us off with some awesome information.
Good morning. As Cheyney said, my name is Kerilyn, and I'm one of the school liaisons. And we're going to talk just a little bit about 4 of the assessment tools that that we use. We use many, but 4 of them that we use when we're thinking about transition planning, talking to teachers, talking to parents. And so one of the very first things I know that I do when introducing transitional assessments to students is really spending some time and helping them to understand the importance and the significance of what we can find and how a transitional assessment can benefit them. And so some things are making sure that our students really understand that they need to be making selections within these assessments based on their own personal interests and their own vision of their life, and not to make selections based on some of these things that they, that they may think, for example, and I'll give some examples as we go through. But when they're answering questions, we don't want them to think about how much money a particular task or a particular position or job may make. We don't want them to think about what someone else has been telling them would be something great for them to do, unless, of course, it's something that they also find interesting. We don't want them to make decisions based on their gender or based on assumptions or stereotypes surrounding their gender, their race, their age, the area in which they live. We don't want them to think about whether that exact question relates to an exact job that they may be interested in, because as you all know, these transitional assessments are kind of gathering data based on so many elements of our personality, our own skill sets, our vision of our future, and they put the pieces together. We want them to be honest, and then we want them to be willing to take several different assessments so that they can kind of compare. And if they're really being honest throughout them, they're going to see trending kind of job categories popping up. And then the bottom one may be perhaps the most important, because it's one thing to jump in and take an assessment, but it's quite another to really take some time to work within the assessment, to explore the information provided, to really look at the career tracks, the post-secondary options available within that particular career assessment result, to find their best match. And some of the tools that we've used, there's one called 123. It's based on the Holland Code career test. And then My Next Move, we use the ONET Interest Profiler as an assessment. My Next Move is also a great one to go to if someone is looking, they have an idea maybe of what they want to do. There's some search options there that are really fantastic. My Career Shines, which used to be associated with Florida Shines, but it is still available, and it's linked to our students' login within their district. They can create login profiles. They can actually save information there, and it's actually used by not only youth, but all the way up through adults. So people who are looking to transition careers, or maybe get some guidance and ideas on, maybe their next step. And then a really cool one, Road Trip Nation, since the pandemic started, has switched over and is free now, which is an interesting option. I'll go over all 3 of these. So the very first one, the 123 Holland Code test, the link is at the top. It's a personality test based on Holland codes. And then and you're going to see something similar pop up throughout the assessments. And if you're familiar with doing assessments, this may just be kind of something that you just go to, these things, but taking a little bit of time to explore the different areas of personality, the realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional, because truly these big key words, these go-to verbs and descriptors of each of these personality profiles, you're going to find over time, especially if you're doing more than one assessment with your students or with your child, from year to year, you're going to probably see that a couple of them are really popping up and are more dominant. Oops. There we go. All right, so this is the 1, 2, 3 career aptitude test by using the Holland Code, and it is a pictorial test, and it gives 15 sets of 4 pictures, and the words are illustrated with words and then a picture image underneath. So this first one says going to the office, a research job, construction and engineering, and creative photography. And this is good for all students. This is obviously one that can be adapted for students depending on their cognitive level, but it is good for all students. And what they have to do is choose their favorite of the 4. Okay, which one of those 4 activities would they most find interesting, or do they most like? And which one of those 4, and only the 4 on the screen, do they definitely not like, or do they like the least, maybe a better way to say it. The one they like the most, the one they like the least. And then they're going to go through a series, 15 sets of these 4 different pictures, choosing the one they like the most and the one they like the least. And then at the end of the test, if you look over to the right-hand side of your screen, at the top, it asks some kind of baseline questions. And it does ask their gender, it asks their age, where they're from, and what their educational level is. Because again, as I mentioned, these can be used by not only students. I mean, we're working with 14 to 22-year-olds for most of us. But this certainly can be used by adults as well. And they can put in their educational level now. They could even put in their anticipated educational level, as the jobs and careers that pop up will fall into those categories. And then towards the bottom, again, you can select, your anticipated level. And oftentimes when I'm working with someone, depending on the student, I may select all of them so that we can see all options. And then after you answer those questions, you're going to come to some screens, and on the screen, it actually shows you how your, what your category types are based on your personality. And the one that I did, I purposely kind of picked them all over the place, and I ended up very balanced. And so you can see that I don't really have any dominant options kind of popping up here. But when you look at the careers on the right-hand side of the screen, I would say they would match my skill set or interests. So I had social services provider, a human resources manager, and a travel agent. And then certainly you could work with a student, because when we're talking, especially our younger students, you're probably working with them going through this, as many of these things are not familiar to them, and certainly working one-on-one when possible to explain and help them explore these options. The next one is the Own It Interest Profiler. And with the Own It Interest Profiler, it's certainly a favorite that even with the schools that we worked with, I know a lot of them use this. It's something we like to use with students. And it is not very long. It is 60 specific task questions. And if you think about it, the last one, the 1, 2, 3 test, had 15 sets of 4. And this one has 60, so we're still looking at the same number. It answers on a 5-point scale from something I really, really like, something I really, really don't like. It uses faces, so it's pretty easy. It links to many career options, and it shows a video of the career along with an audio description, links to other fields. They can select career options based on their experience and education required. And then it connects to the same personality type, so that these are all really interconnected through the Department of Labor. So my next move is the company or the organization that hosts the Own It Interest Profiler. And so when you go to the website, the very first thing you're going to see is my next move. And then here is what I mentioned earlier. If you have a student who has an idea of something that they're interested in, certainly on the left-hand side, you can see where it says search careers with keywords. If they don't know maybe exactly what they want to do, but they have an idea and they want to get into the medical field, they want to get into nursing, they want to get into construction, maybe they want to get into education or office, they can type in those types of words there and find career clusters. So specific careers, career clusters. And then on the right-hand side is where we'll access the tell us what you'd like to do. And that's how we're going to get to the career interest Own It Explore. So if they've already taken one, and this is one of the features I do like about this one, And when we work with students, we record their scores because sometimes they want to get back in, or many times they want to get back in, and we don't want them retaking the test every time. So there is a spot, if you look kind of where that yellow arrow is in the center of the screen where it says enter scores, where you can click there and enter the scores in from the previous time a student took the assessment and jump right into all of the results. On the bottom of the screen is where we're going to get to, this is what the assessment actually looks like. So if you look at the faces right underneath where it says Own It Interest Profiler, on the left side, it has a face with the X'd out, like crossed closed eyes and the tongue out, and that's the most dislike. Either I'm definitely not interested or I don't like this one. On the far right side, there's the happy face with the smiling teeth. And I always make sure to point out what the faces mean, because it seems like it would be obvious, but you just don't really know. So making sure that a student acknowledges that I'm working with it, they understand what the different faces mean. And the one in the center with the slanted line is the one that I'm not really sure. And if a student is unsure, for example, what does it mean to lay brick or tile? They may ask that. And I encourage them to ask if there's something they don't know what it is, to please ask. And then, we would try very hard to explain it to them without influencing their decision. So just a baseline discussion on what that means. And then again, reminding them to answer honestly. And we're not asking them to pick, do they want building kitchen cabinets to be their career? It's more, does the activity of building kitchen cabinets or putting things together interest them? Once they finish that assessment, again, similar to the 1, 2, 3 profiler, it asks for their job zone. And then you can actually click on each one and it will explain the difference between the different job zones. Job zone 1 basically is little to no preparation, and that could be a GED or a high school diploma, or it could be none. And then moving up to job zone 5, where it's looking at, it says extensive preparation, and that's looking at graduate school, some sort of doctorate program for measure on that one. The bottom right hand side, this is the results that popped up for one of the ones that we did. And for example, we're going to look at child care workers. And on the right side of the screen is the page that would pop up for the student. So it's colorful, it's boxed. You see big words on there like knowledge, skills, abilities, personality, technology. If you, depending on how much you interact with this, because Own It Interest Profiler may be something that you already use with your students. But there's a lot of information here, and a lot of times we're pressed for time. If you haven't had time to really help a student explore these different pieces of the profiler, I say do it. It's worth taking some time in class. It's worth taking some one-on-one time to help them understand what's here, especially once they kind of narrow down the career that they may be looking towards for post-secondary. As you get into time for, this is a great thing to print out to bring into their IEP, for example, okay? And so on this one, childcare workers, you'll notice in the upper left, there's a little tiny picture, and I think I blew it up on the bottom left side. But many of the careers that are found within the Own It Interest Profiler, all coming from that Department of Labor, have pictures and they have videos. And the videos are really helpful. Most are under 2 minutes long, and they kind of give a brief description, which is great for students because students don't have the knowledge base that we do to really understand what their career selection may mean. But this video, and it goes from, like in this video, it talks about assistant teachers, childcare workers, toddler teachers, and it talks about the different types of things, and it shows what they may be doing, which can be very helpful for students. Another big thing I like is right smack dab in the center bottom of the screen, there are 2 things, or 3, actually, all of those: education, job outlook, and explore more. So the educational level, underneath that, there's a find training. And if you click on find training, you're going to come to a screen where a student can type in their zip code and actually find trainings within the area or within the state that offer that program. So I happen to live in Indian River County, looking at childcare workers. If I were to click on find training, type in our zip code, Indian River State College pops up. And then from there, you can get a direct link to their program, and it talks about their different pathways associated with childcare worker or early childhood education. And then in the center, the job outlook, they can explore the, how much money a particular job makes from the lowest to the highest in the average. And then really exciting is out to the right, because if we can get our students to find one career that interests them or something that they know of, oftentimes we can find related careers or professions or skill-based jobs that they had never thought of, because our students' scopes are very limited to what they've been exposed to, as we know. So the next one is My Career Shines. And I really like My Career Shines too. And this one is similar. Again, they're all related. They're all connected to that Department of Labor. But this one, a student can log in with their school login for the most part. You can also create an account for free. The services that are related, they're for all Florida residents. So this is for someone who's in school now, so that 14 to 22-year-old age. And it goes all the way through, like I said, it could be someone in their 60s looking to, transition or find a new job. They can be used to create an online portfolio. They can work through their resume, share experience and accomplishments. And then it offers more than just that interest assessment. So within the My Career Shines, a student can actually do a skills confidence assessment. So what skills do you believe you're good at doing? So it's one thing to be interested in different activities or different tasks, and it's another to believe that you might be good at doing something. And so that's an interesting take on a little different version, especially if you're working with students who are a little bit higher cognitively. And then work values inventory, right? So each of us, has do we like working with other people? Do we like working in groups? Do you like to do the same thing every day? Do you like to have every day be something different? Do you like to be in control of what you're doing or help lead other people? Or do you like to be the person who's being told what to do? And some of those things you're going to find in there. And so this is what that home screen looks like. So it's their login or create an account. And here are the 3 assessments. And so the interest assessment at the top, the confidence assessment, it says rate how confident you are that you can accomplish each activity. When you're finished, review the skills and then explore those careers that are related. And you can just imagine how much better of a profile or how much more understanding you may have of a particular career path if you've completed all 3 of these assessments and you start to look for overlapping, in many cases with the help of us working with students, but finding those overlapping skills or interests. And then out to the right, you'll notice that when you're working in My Career Shines, that it kind of keeps a to-do task or tab for the students to do. And it has things like update your profile, look for a specific report, determine the skills and knowledge that are needed to improve, and then work on those skills, which is a good thing. This is an example of the reports that you would see after each one. They are all based on, and not the reports, I'm sorry, this is what they look like, but each of these are based also on that 5-point Likert scale that we saw within the ONET Interest Explorer, except that there are no pictorial representations. It either starts with strongly dislike all the way to strongly like, or in the example for the skills and the work values, you're going to see a 1 for the ones that you least like or are not interested or cannot do, all the way to 5, which would be like, I can certainly do this task. Or for work values, it would be like, I would not consider a job without this particular work value. For example, on that one, it says feel a sense of achievement at the end of the day. I mean, if that's something that's really important to your student, they want to know that they started with this stack of papers, and by the end of the day, the stack is gone. And whether it's entered in the computer, whether it's filed in the cabinet, whether they're processed, through working with people or, shredded on whatever level. So many different levels there. And this is an example again of the child care worker, because when I wanted to show the difference between the different programs, this is within My Career Shines, child care worker. The information is the same. You're going to see that the video is the same. Again, it's all coming from the Department of Labor. It's just presented, I don't know, and not quite as, it's not very picture friendly. It's not bright and colorful. It's not divided into boxes per se. but it is still organized. This one uses tabs. The quick facts are found at the bottom that talk about, the national outlook. Instead of a sunny or a cloud, it's going to show the exact percentage of increase, and a student can find information there. And just as in the O-Net interest profiler, certainly they can print these details for future use. And then again, just looking at these, what I did like on this one is if you look to the right side of the screen, it shows the yearly salary. And I know the students I work with, and probably many times the ones that you're working with or that your teachers are working with, they go right to money every time. They go right to money. And this one broke it down into hourly as well. So because a student sees $20,000, $30,000, and they think, wow, this is the job I want. But then whenever you start to break it down by hour, and you can break it down by week, and you can break it down by how much money they make a week, and then that leads you into your budgeting activity. This would be great to pair with the budgeting activity, actually. I think it brings it home a little bit more, because $25,000 sounds like a lot of money, but our children, our youth, our students don't understand that they're not getting a lump sum of that money. It's supposed to last them those 12 months. So. And then Road Trip Nation is a really cool one, and it's very different from the other ones. It initially had, and I forgot to take this off. I see I left it on there, and I apologize. Last year, it cost $24 to unlock all the content. This year, when I was exploring and using it, I didn't have to pay for any of it, and they've taken away the pieces that were locked, which was interesting. So it's not set up like the others. It asks you 3 questions, and you're only allowed to answer one of each one. So I know for me, it took some time kind of narrowing down what I wanted, because these kinds of things are really exciting to me. But it has a real human element. It connects to actual specific real life people and their careers and jobs, not to general career information. So it kind of shows in a way how you can take your interests and your passions and your skills and mix them together and find a job that you may not have even know existed through, being dedicated and exploring really what's out there. And then it shows a short video for many of them that highlight that person's personal career path. So it shows what their post-secondary experiences were, education was, and then how they got into their positions. You're going to see, if you do use this one at all, you will see John Legend over here on the right side. So there are some famous people that use it. And the website is at the bottom. So the 3 things they have to choose are what interests you the most. And it's actually a list of, I want to say, like 25 different things. So you choose one that interests you. You choose, what interests you the most. So what I lose track of time when I'm learning about. The second one you're going to pick, it says what interests you. And then so it just says I'm also into, and you pick something different. So for me, I picked nonprofit organizations, and then I picked education. And then the very last one, it says what lights you up at your core. And then you would pick one of those options as well. And then it pairs you up with different careers that were aligned based on those selections. And so for this particular person, her name was Ellis Rosenblum. And then she actually started an organization called Grads of Life. And her whole, and we're not going to show the video today, but her whole, what she does is she actually helps employers find employees or candidates for jobs that maybe they haven't had the, maybe not the ideal track to getting into a particular place. Maybe they had some life hiccups. Maybe they could be a student with disabilities. Maybe they had gotten into trouble or made some poor choices in their past, and they've worked through those things. So it's interesting that she made her job to help employers find people, who are very qualified to meet a certain demand or task, but in a very different way. And it was really cool to me to see people from all over the United States doing all kinds of jobs based on their interest. And that to me was very hopeful, because sometimes if you're used to working with O-Net Interest Profiler, My Career Shines, 1, 2, 3 assessment, or any of the adapted versions too, sometimes we get stuck into those boxes. And so this one just gave a bit more of a human element. And so the other things you can see here, so this one explains like the milestones she had in her life. And she shares a little bit of how education was, her top priority. Each one of the people share their hurdles or challenges that they overcame, excuse me. And then she shares a little bit about each of them, share what they do, what are their skills and qualities, what do they do beyond high school. And ultimately, when working with students in career assessments, it's really getting them to think about, we're talking about at age 14, having students think about their post-secondary goals and really starting to get them into those, transitional skills, those employment-based skills that they can learn in school, those specific classes that they can take that are going to relate to their interests and their career goals, and getting them into those things as soon as possible so that they can find success. And just making sure that when they're doing these assessments that they are finding what it is that he or she likes, what activities draw them in. And these are things you can do activities in your classroom to highlight, and you probably are. But what are they good at? If they're not noticing it, if you have a student that's able to get other students focused, that is a skill. Those leadership skills are things that they may not realize they do, and that as educators, we have to help them notice. And then what's important to them, and this is something that you could even do, like we get to know them in our classes, but this could be a piece that we work with their families. What are they passionate about? What's really important to him or her at school? What's really important to that student at home? And using those things to push them forward. And now we have my colleagues, Rita and Cheyney, who are going to talk about some other transitional assessments. So they're going to talk about, so Rita and Cheyney, can you hear me?
Yes, we do. You
Okay.
can move on to the next slide.
Thanks.
So the first thing we want to talk to you a little bit about is some of the adapted assessments that we have. And the first one is the Pictorial Career Interest Inventory. And that's picture-based and 24 questions and covers 8 job cluster areas. And Cheyney's going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then we also have the ONET Interest Profiler that Kerilyn was talking about, but we have adapted it with pictures. And it comes with 60 questions and 6 occupational interest clusters. And we'll talk a little bit more about that one as well. 2 of the other ones that we use, one is called the ONET Ability Profiler. And that one requires a 6th grade reading level. And it actually covers 9 job relevant activity areas, skill areas. And some of those include academic and hands-on. So we have things like arithmetic, reasoning, computation, spatial abilities, motor coordination, manual dexterity, and then based on the student's scores in those areas, it will match them up with skills that they need to complete certain jobs. The ONET Work Importance Locator, and that one ranks the 20 work values that Kerilyn was talking about. And it's aligned to 6 work value areas as well. And all of these ONET ones are available for free on their website. Some do require you to, like the Work Importance Locator would require you to download it, print it, things like that. The Ability Profiler has some aspects to it that you have to print, as well as the dexterity one, you would have to get your hands on a dexterity board, but we do have some of that available. But we're going to turn it over to Cheyney to talk to you a little bit about the Pictorial Career Interest Inventory.
So as Rita mentioned, the Pictorial Career Interest is 24 questions. And on each page, students are going to see what's in one of those boxes on the screen. So they might see the E and F picture, and they're going to decide between those 2 jobs, which they would rather do. And kind of like Kerilyn said, it doesn't have to be something that they would select as a career per se, but which one looks more enjoyable to them. So which would they have more fun doing? A lot of times we'll say. And sometimes we'll talk with the students, we really designed this one for students with more complex cognitive disabilities. So we'll talk with them about what those jobs are, what it might entail. And I've had students tell me before, I don't like either of those, but I just say, if given the choice between both of those, which would be better to do for you. So it doesn't have to be, your end all career. But again, it's going to give you an idea of some of the job clusters that might be better for you. And on the next slide, we'll see that's kind of what our sheet looks like that we would take scores on, and tally, which interest areas they're more interested in than others. And it's also a good idea, to kind of look at the interest areas that scored really low. So, let's say landscaping was really low. Well, then let's talk with them about why that was low. Do they not like working outside? Do they not like plants? And you can kind of look at those things to narrow down their career clusters, especially if they have a ton of interest in a couple of things, and you need to be able to even narrow it down a little bit more. And then I think Rita is going to speak a little bit more about the adapted ONET.
And like we were saying, that we have taken the ONET career interest profiler and we have adapted it with pictures because a picture speaks 1,000 words. So we created a version that does include pictures and helps our students to visualize and understand the concepts of each job. So while they may not know what it looks like to lay brick or tile because they've never seen anyone do it, when they see that picture, they can kind of get an idea of what it involves. So it might involve working outside, getting a little dirty, working with tools, things like that, so that they get that idea of it. And the ONET interest profiler that Kerilyn was speaking of on My Next Move is based on a 5-point scale model. But there is also a 3-point scale model available, and ONET's research indicated that there was no significant difference in the assessment outcomes based on the 3 versus the 5-point scale. So we elected with our kiddos with more significant needs to stay with the 3-point scale for simplicity, because it's just easier for them to understand. But you can take the scores that they get from that 3-point scale and you can input them back into the My Next Move. And then you can go through and look at all of those career sheets that Kerilyn was showing you.
And so when we're looking at transition assessments or anything that we're doing for transition for the students, we wanted to make sure that what we were doing was age appropriate. So we wanted to make sure that our pictures looked like our students or look like adults, because that's what we're preparing them for. We want to make sure they identify student strengths and transition needs. So not only are we looking at their strengths, but also the needs that they have going forward. It would provide us with present levels of performance in a variety of areas. And that's why we're talking about so many different assessments, because we don't want it to just be one area. We want to have a variety of areas. And assist in writing measurable post-secondary goals. And we're going to talk a little bit about the KUILSA, which is an assessment we developed.
So with the KUILSA, or the Kaiser University Independent Living Skills Assessment, we wanted to make sure that we created a tool to assess independent living skills for students who had little or no reading skills or even had limited verbal communication ability. And we found that there were many checklists out there, but there were none that were student-centered or picture-based. Most of those relied heavily on the opinions of what others had to say about the student, what they knew, what they didn't know. And while that's important information, we felt like it was very important for the student to also demonstrate what they knew or didn't know. And so we created this assessment, and it is geared towards students that are grades 6 through 12. And as I said, it's picture-based, student-centered, and made for students with multiple and complex communication and cognitive disabilities. And we did a lot of research on different assessments and checklists. And in October of 2015, we found and adapted a fairly comprehensive checklist from Washington State University, from the Department of Social and Health Services. And it's a checklist of what they felt their kiddos who were aging out of the foster system needed to know in order to be successful and independent. We also wanted to be sure that it was in a format that was familiar to our students with significant and complex needs. So we modeled our response mode after the ULS curriculum and the Florida State alternate assessment. So there are 3 choices and we scaffold those choices as well. And so it's geared very much towards students who are on an access curriculum. And then
we also wanted to make sure that we were supporting the state performance plan indicators 13 and 14. And if you're not aware of what those are, they all have to do with transition. For 13, we're making sure that the students have an IEP that has transition goals on it. So we wanted to make sure that this was something that they could use to develop that IEP meeting, or to develop that IEP and bring to that IEP meeting. And then 14, indicator 14, talks about that post-secondary success. So after students leave high school, are they successful either in post-secondary schooling or a job, or that independent living? What is that looking like for them? Is it successful? And it's based off of 3 key skill areas and broken down into 14 specific sections, which we'll talk about. But I want to just note that picture there in the center is actually myself on the computer administering the KUILSA to a student. So it's something we can also do via the computer, especially right now. We've gotten really, really good at using Zoom. I think all of us have. And so this was done several years ago, though. And the student was really successful with doing it. Of course, this particular student did have some vocal verbalization, so it was a little easier to do it that way.
Okay, and the 3 key skill areas that Cheyney talked about are independent living skills, community skills, and post-secondary skills. The first 2 are pretty self-evident, but the third one not only covers your typical that you would think about with college, vocational opportunities, but also with work and career opportunities. So these are all areas that IDEA says that we need to look at when we're conducting transition assessments.
And then we've broken that down into 14 sections. And as Rita said, the assessment that we found had sections such as these, or very similar to them. And so we thought that they were also really, really important for students to be able to know once they graduate, or even while they're in high school, to be able to develop these skills. So I won't read them to you, but as you can see, it's a wide variety of skills, from food management all the way to legal skills. So anything we think about as adults that we need to know, we want our students to be able to know as well.
And one of the things that we wanted to be sure was that teachers didn't have to struggle to find components that they could use in order to assess their students. So our list of components is small. The first 3 we provide with the administration manual, and that's your virtual guide to how to conduct the assessment. And then we also have the assessment manual itself, and that is available in printed form or digitally, I should say. And then the student response Excel workbook, that is only available digitally, but it could be printed out. And then there's a couple of other things that items that teachers will need to provide if they're doing the assessment themselves. And the first one is a child-proof prescription bottle. And that one, a lot of times you can go to your local pharmacy and ask them or request it, and they will give you a new unused one for free a lot of times. If not, just take an old prescription bottle that you have, take the label off, wash it real good, and then you can use that. But just be sure that it's child-proof so that they have to kind of figure out how to open it. And then the other thing you'll need is Post-it notes or something similar, maybe a index card or a piece of paper, a couple of pieces of paper, so that you can cover up incorrect answers that might be given by the student during the assessment. And that's it for the components that you need.
And so we want to just go over a couple of notes about the assessment, if you chose to use it, some things we've built into it. So one of the primary principles in the development of any assessment tool is that we want to make sure every effort is made to ensure all students have an equal opportunity to demonstrate his or her knowledge and skills. So with that, we wanted to make sure that the KUILSA had these things built in. We wanted to have some of these things already there. The teachers don't have to really do anything extra outside of what they're doing with their students regularly. So to address this, we wanted to make sure that the presentation mode was very flexible. You know, like I said, you can do it on the computer, you can do it in person. Scheduling is also flexible. It's not one where you have to sit down and do the entire assessment because it does take about 90 minutes to 2 hours to complete the entire thing. That sounds very daunting to most teachers and to even students. So we want to make sure that you know that you can do one section at a time. You can do a few questions from a section at a time, and that's okay. Flexible settings. So I don't know that we've had anyone do it as a whole group lesson, but you really could if you chose to do so. Of course, it's best one-on-one, but that could be in the classroom. It could be in a speech room, an OT room, any place that the student is comfortable, of course, would probably be best practice. And then the response mode, Rita is going to go over the variety of accommodations that can be used for that.
So the student response mode, it doesn't matter whether they're able to verbalize, to point, to touch, whether they use sign language, they use a switch, or they use eye gaze. We should, as administrators, accept any of the assessment, accept any response mode that the student utilizes to indicate a response. The only thing is if they select more than one response option, then you need to seek clarification for it, and then also redirect them to choose only one answer. So no matter what their mode of response is, we're as administrators of the assessment, we're going to accept that mode.
So redirection, you are free to repeat the directions, questions, and response items. It's not that you have to read the question once and then get the student's answer there. It is fine to repeat it if you need to. We've even had folks ask before about some of the questions can be a little wordy. Is it okay to take some of the words out? And that's fine too, especially for students on the autism spectrum. Sometimes less words are better. So as long as you're not changing the meaning of the question and answers, that is totally okay. Feel free to use that nonverbal refocusing, whether that's physical cueing or even just your own eye gaze to get the student back on track. Any of those things are perfectly fine. Whatever you're using regularly in your classroom and with the student who's taking the assessment is what we want you to use for the assessment as well.
And that brings us to reinforcement. And this can often be difficult to do when assessing a student without giving specific feedback as to the right or wrong answer. But here's a few examples on the screen that you might use when assessing your students. So you're focusing nicely. Thank you for looking at all the answer choices. Or I like the way you're working. But we want to assure you, we've all had times when our feedback might have indicated a right or wrong answer. Don't panic, just try to move on and not draw a lot of attention to it.
So the material placement, that's another thing that, again, is flexible. We just want to make sure your assessment manual should be placed so that the student has a clear view of the questions and answer choices. That's the most important things. And then, of course, you can make special accommodations to accommodate student needs. So like in the picture on the right there, that's myself standing with a student because that was the easiest way for him to be able to access it. If I could hold it right at his eye level, or just below it, then he was better able to access it and he could still stay in his wheelchair. So whatever accommodations or need for that, I know we've sat on the floor before, we've sat in a beanbag chair, whatever is easiest for the student and allows them to be the most comfortable so that you're getting a true idea of what they know and don't know is best.
And then augmentative and alternative communication devices. If that's something that your student typically uses to communicate, this works great with that. And I wish I had a screenshot of our assessment on there, but basically you're going to see on each page, you're going to see a prompt at the top that you read to the student. And then you're going to see answer choices A, B, and C, which they'll select from. So our assessment is set up already to be able to use beautifully with an AAC device. So you're just basically going to, I would suggest that you set up a page in their AAC device with the choices of A, B, and C so that they can make the selection A, B, or C from that. That would be the easiest, because to try and go through hundreds of questions and provide the answers for each one for them to select from would be a little daunting. Also, if a student uses eye gaze, it is available that you can print it out and you could enlarge the pictures. You could then put them on an eye gaze board, which would allow the student to use eye gaze as their method of indicating their answer. Another thing that you could use is color coding. I've seen that used a lot with SLPs. So you could color code the A, B, and C so that the student could indicate that way. So basically use any type of communication device in the best way for your students. There is no right or wrong.
And then I don't need to read all of these to you. We've gone over most of them, but we just want to remind you that any accommodations that are used frequently in your classroom or are on your students' IEPs, those are all perfectly okay to continue to use. Probably most frequently we see the frequent breaks and the material placement being a little bit different. The one-sided booklets also help if you have a student that gets distracted from being able to see 2 pages at a time. That can be helpful. Of course, you can maneuver it so that they can only see one at a time as well with the 2-sided books. But also, like Rita said, if you want to have it a little bit bigger, being able to have those one-sided booklets can be good if you wanted to enlarge something or cut it out and make it so that the spaces were a little larger in between each answer option. And then, any students who have hearing impairments, visual impairments, limited physical ability and mobility, or have English as a second language, I know that they're going to have specific accommodations. And we want you to know that that is perfectly okay to use those as well. If your student signs, then it would be great to have an interpreter there to assist with that. Same with visual impairments. We've not yet had anyone try to use Braille with this, but we have had to describe pictures in the past just for students who have some vision but needed a little more explanation on the picture choices. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Damien, who's going to speak a little bit about mentoring and transition.
Good day, everybody. Hello. Thank you very much to my awesome team members and Rita and Cheyney, and discussing absolutely probably the best living skills assessment that there is out there on the market. And I say that with complete and utter confidence. Thank you guys very much. Again, my name is Damien Hunte, and I'm here to talk about how mentoring to transition and how assessment actually helps us through that. And while we're doing that, let me add the caveat that this particular presentation, or this portion of the presentation, is ultimately about making sure that, if nothing else, our bottom line is helping the individual that we decide to go into this business for, and that's our youth. So let me just break down what mentoring provides, and basically what it is in a nutshell. It's the willingness to share, your life skills, your knowledge, the information that you say that you are maybe an expert in. Or if nothing else, it provides an opportunity for you as a mentor to really just showcase who you are as a person. The second point right there is making sure that you understand that you are the positive role model. I have witnessed, as many of my colleagues have also, and I'm sure many of you have, really seen that a student may, or a young person may not be able to share who they, their innermost thoughts, to a lot of people. But you as a mentor, being a professional, you as a mentor, being a teacher, and we actually did a webinar, Mentor to Teach, you have actually the responsibility to be that positive influence for that young person. Wrapping up number 3, we're looking at also the enthusiasm. You by far are the person that most people will not get enough credit for. You're the biggest cheerleader. You're the one that, if nothing else, folks understand exactly how to motivate, how to inspire that young person to do a lot more. You want to be the person that really go ahead and let them understand that they're able to do more than what they think they're capable of doing. You're the yes when they are looking for a way to say no. You're the person that really goes forth and really showcase that, guess what? You can do this if you want to. You have the opportunity to move and pursue things more than what you maybe even been open to. Next point there. Yes, a zeal to take a personal interest in mentoring and that relationship. You have to understand that without your enthusiasm, without you letting them and actually opening up the minds of these young people, they sort of hinge their mindset and put it in a cage. It is your job to figure out that quote unquote Da Vinci Code and unlock their mind, unlock their potential toward their purpose and their destiny, toward their transitional goals, toward their transitional excuse me, opportunity that the world is legitimately open for them. It is also your responsibility to understand this. As a mentor, you have to be there for them consistently, making sure that you understand they need somebody, and that somebody may very well be you, that's going to change their life, that's going to change their thought process, that's going to change their whole entire perspective of life around. It is literally the duty of a good mentor to assist their mentee to navigate through various situations. The main objective of a mentor is to introduce their protege to the best version of themselves. And also, I'm going to also go into what the assessment provides. My colleagues, both Kerilyn and Rita and Cheyney, have all mentioned it, but we actually use, I use the interest profile, the ONA interest profile all the time, because you're going to run into a kid that says, I just don't know what I'm going to do. So this is what assessments actually provide. It actually helps provide instruction. It gives them a blueprint or a map towards where their skill sets are and their interests are. As a former job developer, I found out that if I take what they like to do compared to what their interests are, or what they actually through an assessment says that they're able to do, I can pretty much formulate, or we can pretty much formulate, listen, you want to, prime example, I had a young man that wanted to be a biochemist, but he didn't like math. He really didn't like science. He did, his reading scores were a little low, but he loves chemistry. He didn't like all the bookwork that requires for the chemistry, but for the most part, he wanted to be a biochemist. And when asking him, what did you like about being a biochemist, it's actually the chemicals. So one of the things I looked at is, okay, his interest and where he graded well within the assessment. And what we decided to do is we decided to look at chemistry and things that he can do. He was able to drive. He had his learner's permit. So what about a hazmat driver? And you're making a decent living, even more so than the teacher that's actually teaching you. How about that? And you don't have to go through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of school. Would you be interested? Can you get a driver's license? Can you go ahead and get your CDL and potentially go ahead and get your hazmat certification? How about those particular things? And guess what? That young man is now on his way. He already has a CDL. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with just say, look, your ideas are not wrong, but let's open it up. And it gives you those learning strategies. It shows the progress. It shows that, and it gives them accountability. Once you give a young man the assessment, young people, the assessment, it is now on them to take onus. They have to take a step. Assessment serves as an individual evaluation system, and to compare their performance across the spectrum and across populations. The purpose of an assessment is to gather relevant information about that young person performance and their progress, or to determine a mentee's or a young person's interest to make judgment about their learning process. After receiving this information, mentors can reflect on each mentee's level of achievement as well as customize their transition. And that goes on right now into one of my final points here, mentoring through assessment. If I didn't have some of these assessments, I would not be able to get the most out of a mentoring session with the young person that I call a mentee or protege. So let's go with it. Through the assessment, a mentor can actually identify what that young person's strengths are. And a lot of people tend to say, strengths or weaknesses. I say eventually we're gonna try to work on those weaknesses to make them strengths. So we're gonna make sure that we focus on what they do extremely, extremely well. Listening is one of the major components of being a mentor or even being in this particular arena of education. But we have to listen, we have to consult, we have to encourage. Again, you're going to always hear me about motivation and inspiration, because the truth of the matter is, without those particular attributes, you can't be able to actually be a well-rounded mentor for the individual that you need. And of course, you got to analyze. We have to make sure that we improve on the skills that we're giving them, the strategies. Transition, I think this is a terminology, and we sort of sometimes make it a little smaller in the meaning. Transition is basically the success that we poured all our resources in to help this individual be the best version of themselves. And we're going to make sure that we expose them and introduce them to things that they never ever thought of. The example that I just gave you, that young person probably has never met a hazmat driver, but I guarantee while driving in a vehicle or whether a bus or maybe walking down the street, he's probably seen a gas tanker driving down because they have to transport fuel or transport oil, or they may have seen the little signs and wonder what those particular things is. Guess what? Through this assessment, this one particular assessment I'm referring to, but all the assessments that we spoke of today, they're able to open up their minds and give them an opportunity to enlighten them on things they never thought about. How about introducing them to being a photographer? How about, if they play video games, how about introducing them with not just being game designers? How about they can actually maybe start up a comic book, or maybe they're doing things that other young people like themselves would be really interested in. And you're absolutely right. We're going to develop these confidence, because the truth of the matter is, without those particular things, it will never happen. Without assessment, we cannot plan, set goals, or achieve them. Assessment drives all those things. The mentor listens, consults, encourages, and mentors the young person toward their destination. Through these evaluations and these assessments, the mentor is better to position themselves to provide insight for improvement of long-term goals. And that is exactly what we're doing through mentoring. We're making sure that we help mold these young minds into being the work of art that we know that they are. Yes, there are some things that they're a little clutter maybe on the top, but we're going to help them remove those things, excavate that particular thing, so that seedling has an opportunity to become the giant redwood. Because in our society needs whatever that young person has, whatever that young person has in their life, whatever skill sets they have. Our society, me, myself, my children's children may need exactly what they have. So as a mentor, you have an opportunity to take the limits off that potential, so that young person can be the best person our society needs for today. And with that being said, I am going to pass it over to our dynamic director, Dr. Miller. Oh, or maybe I'm going back to Cheyney. I'm sorry.
Well, we just hope that you're now able to identify the importance of conducting transition assessments to guide transition planning for students with disabilities, identify the significance of the KUILSA and other assessment tools for students with significant needs, and identify the benefits that mentoring can offer students in the transition process.